Hi guys, my name is Sean. I'm a houseplant enthusiast from Jakarta, Indonesia. Welcome to today's video where I'm going to be sharing with you the Calathea care tips. And I live in the tropics, just so you know, and I know that a lot of us live in different conditions, so my advice here pretty much applies mostly to the tropics, but there are a lot of things that pertain to your environment as well, so do pay attention. The Calathea is actually a very difficult houseplant to care for, although I must say it's easy once you get the hang of it, and you do have to follow the care like a gospel basically, whether it's like the soil, the sunlight, the watering, and all that good stuff, which we will go through today. So as you can see here, this is today's set, and I brought at least one species out of all my Calatheas, and I did not know that I have so many until now. And there are even duplicates in some species that I did not manage to bring over, but yeah, this is pretty much everybody that we have here. And as a disclaimer, everything that I show on this table, not all of them are Calatheas. I'm gonna talk about these in the next video because there are actually a few species in here, but I'm gonna focus mostly on the Calatheas now, I guess. So welcome to today's classroom, and we have a lot of lessons ahead of us, so please take note. I actually do have a cheat sheet here because there's a lot of ground to cover and I do not want to miss out anything. So the first thing that I'm going to cover here is the potting mix, which is very important. First of all, Calatheas need to be in super airy and humid potting mix that's not allowed to dry out for too long. And I'm going to show you that in an example. Okay, so here's my attempt at trying to explain how the potting media and the moisture works for Calathea. So this is your basic potting media, for example, just using cotton pads. And then, you know, when you water your plants, you just get it wet, right? So this is what happens with most of your potted plants. It's just gonna get wet. So this kind of media that's compacted, if a Calathea is living in this, it will kill it very quickly, like in a matter of hours. So what Calatheas actually want is this. Let me show you. Squeeze all the water out. I don't need that anymore. So we shredded everything and then squeeze even more of the water out. So this kind of fluffiness is what the Calatheas actually want. They want fluffy, airy, humid potting mix that is never allowed to dry it out way too much, like not completely and definitely not for long. You can let them dry out actually completely for, I don't know, maybe half a day or so in my conditions. In high humidity, they're still gonna be okay. Of course, if you live in low humidity, you may not wanna let it get so critically dry, but this is what they want. So we have to give them something very airy for the roots to take in the humidity, but never drown them. They get drowned very easily. So when my hands are handling this, my hands never wet. I can feel the humidity of the media here, but my hand's never gonna get really wet. So this is what they like. Okay, so I hope that that's really helpful for you to know. In all my Calatheas here, I actually use my forest floor potting mix. I have a video of that, so I'm gonna link that up above. But it's basically dried bamboo, dried twigs, burnt rice hull, perlite, worm casting. So they do need a little bit of nutrients there. Then the worm casting serves as a bit of fertilizer for them. But I also do sprinkle a little bit of slow release fertilizer for them. I would not fertilize them with my chemical grow more fertilizer, which is the ones that you mix in water, because those are a little bit harsh. And Calatheas have very sensitive leaves. And all the tips that I'm talking today, by the way, they apply to the other marantaceae families, which is another video for another day, but they contain the maranta, the nanti, and the stromanthes as well. Ooh, sorry, so this is me filming a little bit in the future, and I want to talk about the potting mix here. And I know that not a lot of you guys have the same access to this kind of potting mix that I have. Do not worry, because you can actually replicate it. A lot of people have success with equal parts of cocoa peat and perlite. You also do want to add maybe some nutrients like worm casting in there. You can also mix a little bit of bark, a little bit of sphagnum moss, but just keep in mind when you plant your plants, do not give them, do not compact the potting mix. Just keep in mind they want to be airy where possible. Terracotta pots will be very good for them. So the trick is to give them airy potting mix that is watered lightly but very frequently. So the potting mix is the number one variable that I would say will determine the success of your Calatheas or marantaceae. But then the next would be with watering. So what I do with watering for all of these guys is that I will hose them down very lightly every day. So they do require to be frequently watered, but they don't want to be sitting in water. So do not let them be in compact or soggy water for too long. They will completely die. And some of them I just basically take a mister and just mist at the top of the potting mix. And there are signs of overwatering that you should pay attention to, which is that they would give you some of the yellowing leaves that fall off, or in some cases, they would also crisp up. But then with overwatering, the crisp would have a little bit of yellow line around it, so that's when you know that it is overwatering. So anything that shows signs of yellowing is probably overwatering, or it could also be a sign that the leaf is old and is tired, but most likely it's overwatering, because I know that that's 90% how you guys are killing your Calatheas. The next factor is light, and normally when I talk about plant care, light is my number one factor. But again, in this Calathea, I want to remind you guys the number one factor that determines their longevity is the potting mix, number one. Number two is the watering. Number three, the light is actually very important as well. They like low to medium light. Some of the species actually prefer very low light, like this Calathea ornata. And when I say low light, I don't mean no light at all. Just keep in mind that Calatheas actually come from jungle floors, like there's a dense canopy on top of them where they never get direct sunlight, and they really thrive in that condition. So when you see that some of the leaves are curling, it could be a multitude of other factors like pest, or it could be the wrong kind of watering. But most likely when you see the leaves curl, that's because they're trying to shield themselves from excessive light. Do not give them bright indirect light. Give them somewhere between medium to low light. With the exception of maybe the Calathea, it's like way under the other plants, the Calathea orbifolia here. As you can see, they actually have lighter color foliage with a lot of silvers, which means that they can take a little bit of light. This doesn't mean that they prefer that kind of bright light. They still thrive, in my opinion, in medium indirect light. And the next factor, which the Calatheas are really well known for, is that they are humidity-loving plants. I find that to be true for a lot of the species, but I do have a few species that I tried caring for indoors where the humidity dips to about 50% at night, and they seem to be doing okay. Humidity, I think, is important because they have such paper-thin leaves that sometimes water just evaporates from the leaves so fast if you have low humidity that the leaves are just going to crisp up. And usually humidity issues would start crisping from the edge of the leaves. By the way, this is similar to watering issues, where if you have watering issues where there's overwatering or underwatering, the problem will manifest itself from the edge of the leaves. However, if you see some weird dots or yellowing or any weird crisping in the middle of the leaves, that's usually fungal and bacterial infection, which I'm going to talk about quickly now because I'm going to forget later. So these guys, they actually are very prone to bacteria and fungi, especially if your water is tap water or if it's not clean water. Do not get the leaves wet, you guys. When I water my Calatheas, I actually don't get the leaves wet. I try to just aim at the potting mix. So just keep that in mind, especially when indoors. Do not miss your Calatheas, guys, because that's like, oh my god. I've seen so many people who post on Facebook plant groups that their Calatheas are getting bacterial spots, they're having problems because they just miss the area thinking that it will raise the humidity. So back to our issue of humidity, the best way to raise the humidity if you're living indoors or in a low humidity area would actually be to group your Calatheas as I did like now. You can also use humidifier, and I know that a lot of you guys have success with that in low humidity areas. Of course, here in the tropics, humidity is actually a problem because Calatheas do rot in high humidity here, just so you know. Sorry, let me clarify that. Not that they rot in high humidity, but they rot in a combination of high humidity and very densely wet soil. So over here in the tropics, we really need to be mindful to keep the potting mix, again, airy, very, very airy, and then never compact and wet because they rot too easily here. So one way that you can aerate the soil is that you can actually stab anything, whether you have a chopstick or any kind of stick. In my case, I actually use a moisture meter. What you can do is you can just stab gently at the media and just kind of loosen up the soil. They actually really appreciate that because sometimes the soil or the potting mix gets really compacted over time when you water them. So when you release a little bit of the air in there, they really, really thrive. Okay, back to airflow. These plants actually love humidity, but the problem is that if you leave them in high humidity area that has very still air, they will rot. So if I were you, what I would do is that I would just leave them grouped in a high humidity area, but somewhere maybe not so close, like a little bit further away, I could have a fan blowing, maybe not towards them because you will blow the humidity away, but have the fan aimed at something else so that there's actually circulation around the room. This is indoor, by the way, indoor advice. But when you have it outdoors, naturally, of course I'm assuming, but naturally there will be pretty good airflow. Of course, it differs from every person's living space, but in my case, they actually have excellent airflow outdoors, so I don't really have to worry about it. But they require it because imagine if they were sitting in stagnant, high humidity, or worse, low humidity, they will suffer. The next thing would be pests, and these guys are actually very, very prone to spider mites. And this happens usually indoors because outdoors, well, in my condition at least, these guys have a lot of predatory like spiders and things like that will roam around and feed on the spider mites, so they would keep the spider mites population in check. But when you have it indoors, my gosh, they can actually really decimate your plant. They can grow in population very quickly. So these are basically tiny dots that actually move, and they're usually in the back of the leaves. And then you can also see some fine webbings around it. That's when you know you have spider mites. The way that you would treat them is to just spray the plant down with, well, number one, hose the plant down with super like jet stream of water because they will knock the spider mites out. And number two, definitely neem oil or any kind of chemical. Well, I don't recommend chemical, but neem oil solution would really work, where you really spray them down. And then you have to continue the treatment in about 1 to 2 weeks time to make sure that you break the life cycle of the spider mites. But in my experience, it's very, very manageable, whether it's a Calathea or an alocasia, which is also spider mites magnet. Other than that, I don't really see any kinds of issues, although I did keep my Calatheas outdoors, and some of them do get bitten or fed on by caterpillars, rats, and I don't know what else eats Calatheas, but they do have holes in the leaves. So I'm always jealous when I see people who has grown their Calatheas really beautifully indoors because they have these beautiful, perfect leaves that's clean. And mine's always kind of dusty, and because it gets rained on or sometimes I just hose them down, I get these hard water stains on the leaves. And just before I forget, I'm going to talk about the hard water stains. They do happen with Calatheas, especially the dark leafed ones. The way that you can remove them is to just mix a little bit of water with like a drop or two of soap. You can use my insecticidal bar soap. You can just foam it up and have a little bit of foam in there. And then a few drops of lemon juice. Just squeeze a few lemon juice in there. I don't really measure anything, but then what happens is that the lemon juice will soften the hardened water, will loosen up some of the calcium deposits on the leaves and leave it beautiful and shining. But unfortunately for mine, which we will see maybe in another video when I do a tour, I don't really do that with mine. My leaves are a little bit dirty sometimes, so they have hard water stains. But that's what happens in nature, you guys. You know, you're never gonna get perfect leaves. But I have over 1,000 houseplants in so many genuses and families that I don't have time to clean all their leaves. So please pardon me that my leaves are not perfectly beautiful, but I know that for some of you guys, it really bothers you that the leaves may be a bit dirty. So that's how you can clean them. And be very gentle with them because they have such paper thin leaves. Just want to wipe them off very, very gently. Now, in terms of pruning, which you have to do often with these plants, because number one, they actually shed a lot of old leaves and then they would just turn yellow and then they will dry out. So you can just cut them off. Or sometimes you have overwatering or any kinds of pest problems where the leaf is just damaged out of control. Normally I would recommend to cut the leaf off if it's more than 50% damage, but you just basically cut them at the base of the leaf. Now here's the issue. If you have, what do you call this, overwatering, where it's starting to crisp up from the edge and the crisp will spread. Believe me, they will spread rapidly. And maybe you guys have a hot day coming over that you don't want them to see the crisping. You can cut around it, but just be sure do not cut into fresh tissue, because if you cut into the fresh tissue of the plant, it will cause it to spread infection. It will cause that edge to crisp up. So it's better to just cut a little bit away, just leave a little bit of that crisp there so that the crisp doesn't spread as fast. Now they do flower. These guys have the most insignificant flowers. It's not very beautiful, but they always excite me when they flower. But what I do is that I actually always deadhead them. I just cut them off, cut the flower stalks off, especially when it's just forming, because they actually drain energy from the plant. They're not really that beautiful in my opinion. So just go ahead and cut them off, because this will encourage the plant to give all this energy into new leaves instead. Now, when your Calathea, or if your Calathea, sorry, dies off, what happens is that the whole foliage may completely, I don't know, crisp up or yellowed up or whatever. You can just cut it, the whole thing off. And in this case, I have a Calathea orbifolia. By the way, sorry, hang on. I want to remind you guys, I'm just jumping all over the place here because I'm going to forget things. A lot of Calatheas have been reclassified into the Gepertia family, which I'm not really familiar of, but this is one of them. This is the Gepertia orbifolia, one of the most famous Calatheas, and it's really beautiful. I'm going to do a video on this someday. But this plant actually died into a complete stump. So I cut the whole foliage off, it rotted off or dried off. And then look at that, it's grown. It's the third leaf coming along the way. It's going to take about 2 to 3 months for them to come back. But these guys are actually quite tough. So when you see some of them foliage dying off, or it's just struggling so bad, you see no hope, cut it off and then reduce the watering, because when you have no foliage, you don't need that much watering. In fact, if you keep watering them with no foliage, it might drown the tubers. And Calatheas, actually, their health is inside the tubers, and we're going to talk about tubers in propagations later. But if the tuber is fine, it's not rotted off, there's beautiful root system there, they can grow back. Or even if you have some root rot, as long as the rhizome or the tuber is not rotten off, it will keep growing new roots and new shoots upwards. So be patient with your plant. If you think you killed it, you probably did not. Check the roots, check the tuber, make sure they're okay, and then wait 2 to 3 months for the new foliage to emerge. Trust me, you want to do that because it's so rewarding to see the plants come back from the dead. And I have a video on that, which I'm going to link up above. Now, I've actually had Calatheas grown both indoors and outdoors as an experiment. And I have this Calathea white plate, silver plate, sorry. Calathea silver plate here, the 2 pots. And I want you guys to guess which one is grown indoors, which one is grown outdoors. I'm going to give you 2 seconds. Okay, you ready for the answer? So this one's actually grown indoors. They were bought at around the same time. And I just wanted to see how they do. This one's kind of neglected outdoors. I do hose it down daily. And I see a new leaf coming here. This is so cute. I do keep an eye out for the watering, make sure that it's completely dry between watering. So this one gets a little bit more attention than this one. And actually this one I fertilized a little bit more because indoors in my bedroom here, I do fertilize some of my houseplants here a little bit more often than my outdoor plants. I'm so sorry. I'm not prejudiced, but it's just the way it is. And these guys are actually putting out shiny glossy leaves with less defects than this one, because this is outdoors. You get a lot of, I don't know, animals crawling around them and things like that, because I have bats and snakes and rats and grasshoppers and snails and things like that roaming around at night. So this guy, they're both in the same potting mix. They're both in terracotta pots. Oh my God, sorry, I forgot to mention. Calatheas in my condition prefer terracotta pots than plastic pots because they tend to be so overwatered in plastic pots. Plastic pots retain a lot more moisture. It doesn't allow airflow into the potting medium. So terracotta pot, for sure, hands down, would make your Calatheas thrive. And it's here in my tropic condition. Sorry to not mention that before. But yeah, this guy's thriving really well. So I would say that medium indirect light and proper care, watering, and also fertilizing. Keep in mind, do not over fertilize your Calatheas. They don't actually need a lot of nutrients. In fact, too many fertilizing can burn their leaves or rot them. Just keep that in mind. So just be a little bit more balanced. So for those of you who are growing Calatheas indoors, do not despair because they can actually do better than the Calatheas that are grown outdoors. However, all my other Calatheas that you see here were actually grown outdoors. I just brought them in here for this video. And I just hose them down a lot, and sometimes I would notice yellowing leaves. I actually prune them, so I don't really see many leaves now that are yellowing. But I actually prune them right before this video, and that happens quite often when you're not on top of it. But Calatheas actually do prefer it when you can check in on them often, make sure that they're kind of dry, make sure that their potting mix is sometimes airy where you can aerate them. So that's my tips for Calatheas. I hope I'm very clear. I would say the Calatheas are actually quite easy the minute that you get their conditions right, you understand what they want based on the factors that we talked earlier. And I'm so sorry I jumped around all over the place, but every point that I made in this video is actually very important. This Calathea fasciata, if I'm not wrong, fasciata, sorry. This is doing so well. I got them from these tiny leaves and now it's put out these huge leaves that are bigger than my hands, and this happened in the course of 6 months. So I used to kill a lot of Calatheas And I know that you guys are killing them left and right because I get a lot of questions about them, and that's why a lot of you guys are sort of giving up on them. Please don't, because they're quite cool. And again, number one, I'm going to quickly recap. Number one, the most important thing is the potting mix. Number two is the watering frequency. Do not water them too deeply and too often. They don't want to be too wet. Number three, give them low to medium light. High humidity where possible, but it's not the most important thing. And then airflow. Okay, before I end this video, I'm going to quickly show you guys my 3 or so easiest and most difficult Calatheas, because some of you guys may be starting out with them or have some experience with them. And actually all the Calatheas, while they have very similar care, some of them are actually a little bit different. And yeah, I'm just going to show you some of the ones that are on the opposite extreme of the easiest and the most difficult. So let's start with the easy ones, and let me put a general, what do you call this? A general information. Usually the easier Calatheas will be cheaper. Maybe because they grow so fast and they can thrive in most conditions that they will not cost you too much money. And one of the easier one here is the Calathea conchina. And this is quite beautiful. It's got really beautiful marking on the leaves. Look at that. And I'm so sorry for the little bit of water stain here, but it is quite a striking Calathea. It's very simple looking. It doesn't scream because it doesn't have those patterns, but it's a prolific grower and it can take a lot of different conditions and very forgiving with watering. And the next easy one for me would be this Calathea silver plate. Be sure not to give it too much light because it doesn't really like such bright light, but because it's got lighter color foliage, it can take a little bit more light than your other Calatheas, and they actually grow quite quickly. And as you can see, this one has given me like 3 different plants in a matter of 6 months. I've grown many of these. They're actually widely used for landscaping here. This is another baby, which goes to suggest that these guys are actually very easy to grow. The next easy Calathea would be this Calathea ornata. And this is probably surprising for some of you guys who are living in the lower humidity conditions, because these guys actually do well in high humidity. They have some of the thinnest leaves out of all the Calatheas, but I find that they're the fastest growing. And if you follow my instructions on how to care for Calatheas, these guys will thrive really well because they don't like to be overwatered. They really like low light. And by the way, this guy actually really loves low light. When you give them low light, they give you this beautiful pink leaves, but when you give them a little bit more light, they will give you more of the white shrub. They will lose the pink. This plant was grown from a baby and it's grown so much for me. And as it grew upwards, and now that my balcony here is getting north facing window, the plant is getting more light these days. So these guys are getting a little bit more white than pink. So actually this will be happier when given low light. So just keep that in mind. But this is a prolific grower, and these guys can get huge. I'm going to do a video on these soon, so I'm going to not spoil too much of the details here. But this is an easy one for me. Now, one of the harder ones is this Calathea rufibarba, which is the velvety type Calathea. And oh my god, this is already curling actually. The fact that I moved it here is already showing that it's not happy. They don't like to be moved. And it was actually not curling when I brought them here this morning, about 2 hours ago. They really like low light, and I have a feeling that this, what do you call it? I have some air condition running in this room now because otherwise I'll be sweating balls in here. But they are probably not happy with the sudden drop in humidity. And they do not like to be watered around the leaves because, as you can see, the leaves, this is super fun to pet, by the way. I really love petting them. I'm sorry for the water stains again, but they're very fuzzy. So if you water on the leaves or you get them wet, it's too much surface area where the water is pooling, and they don't like that. It can cause rot very often, but this specimen is grown pretty well. I struggled with this a long time ago, but now it's grown pretty well. Imagine it not curling, sorry, because it was not curling before. I'm so sorry. You have to see it like this. It used to be much better. And another difficult one is this Calathea or Jopertia or Bifolia. This has been featured in some of my videos before, but this one is doing really well just because I've been following my own advice and just keeping them well cared for in terracotta and forest floor potting mix. Just water them lightly every day, give it medium light, and good airflow, and it's doing really well. I have a feeling that this plant likes it outdoors better than indoors, but I do know that a lot of you guys, even in very challenging humidities, have grown them indoors successfully. So yeah. Okay, so I guess the last difficult Calathea would be this Zebrina. This is the challenge to care for. They have this beautiful electric green foliage, and it's starting to curl up a little bit now. It doesn't like to be moved as well. And this one really thrives in very low light. So just keep in mind, when you put them in bright indirect light or even sometimes medium light, the leaves will start curling up. They're just gonna complain. And this is also in airy potting mix, terracotta pot, because they don't need a lot of water to get by. They live in such low light that you don't need to water them as often, but do not let them dry out too completely either. So yeah, this is a very difficult one to care for, but once you have a relationship with them, they become quite easy. I actually have a few pots of these, and they were originally a struggle plant for me, but now I've mastered them and they're doing quite well. I'm beginning to get the hang of it. You just kind of pay attention to the leaves. They also do curl up when they are thirsty, so just keep in mind. But yeah, I would actually underwater this. I would not keep this too wet. Again, because I keep this in such low light that you don't want to drown them in water. They're not going to drink that much water in low light. So I hope that this video is useful for you, that you can muster up the courage to pick up Calatheas again if you have killed them. And just please do follow my instructions as stated here. You do have to adjust sometimes based on your environment and what you have available in your region. I've seen them grown successfully in every corner of the world. So they do require special care and attention and research. I'm at Botanist on Instagram if you want to DM me on any questions regarding plant care and propagations. I'll try my best to get back to you. Meanwhile, do take care and stay safe. I will see you in the next video. Bye!